Dungeon Explorer for the TurboGrafx-16, harkening back to a simpler time when it was okay for a game to have a title that described exactly what you do in it. Dungeon Explorer is effectively a Gauntlet clone. You walk around from a top-down perspective, killing enemies that spawn from little nests that you have to destroy to stem the flow. Like in Gauntlet, for some reason all attacks are ranged, and so you have the option of playing as a fighter with an infinite number of throwing swords if you want to. The idea is to fight your way through a procession of dungeons and kill the bosses at the end, which you can do alongside 4 other players, which is awesome. The game actually has quite a deep RPG system. Your character has 4 attributes: agility, attack, strength and intelligence, and each of the 8 classes of fighter, elf, gnome, thief, warlock, witch, bishop and bard start off with different stats. You also get black and white magic depending on your class, with white magic usually being defensive and black magic usually being attacking. So for example, the bishop's white magic heals your party and his black magic randomly vaporizes an enemy. It's a pretty strong system, but it does have a rather major issue in the way you level up. Rather than getting experience from killing monsters, you automatically go up a level by picking up a crystal that the bosses drop. The problem with this? The number of crystals that appear is the same number of people alive at the time when the boss died, which means if someone was trying to respawn when the others finish off the beast, which is quite likely as the bosses are extremely difficult, a crystal for them doesn't appear, and they don't get to level up, which means that they're weaker than everyone else, which makes them a liability, which means you have to accidentally on purpose leave them behind at the next inn, or start the game over. Seriously, how hard would it have been just to advance everyone 1 level when the boss dies without having to rely on pickups? That's probably my biggest gripe with the game. The other is that it gets stupidly hard, fast. The first dungeon is pretty easy, but the first boss is really difficult, and from there it just moves beyond that into unfair territory. In order to pass the second dungeon, you have to work your way very carefully through corridors of statues which spit fire, finding the minute space where you can shoot them without getting hurt. Following that, the second boss is just brutal. What's really strange is if you do manage to defeat it, your character levels up to a degree that the next dungeon or so isn't actually that bad. It seems the second dungeon lies at a point in the game where the difficulty curve gets too far ahead of the character development curve. Something that makes the game a little bit harder is how the controls are mapped onto the Wiimote. If you press B rather than A, you can move while shooting, which is very useful, especially against the boss characters, but on the remote means you have to press the trigger by stretching your left index finger underneath. Whilst it does leave your right hand free to hold your beer, it's not very comfortable, so I suggest using GameCube controllers if you're not the sort of person that has 5 classic controllers lying around your gold-plated Sky Palace. On the plus side, the game does look good and shares Bomberman 93's demonstration of how nice a sound the TG16 can make. A couple of other remarks about the game. This pickup looks like a bomb. I haven't figured out what it's supposed to be, but judging from the monster's reaction when you pick it up, it makes you smell really bad. Also, at a certain point in the game, you come across a princess who has been captured. By rescuing her, you unlock a password that lets you play as her, and strangely enough it turns out she's a really strong character, which makes you wonder why she couldn't just save herself. So, is Dungeon Explorer worth 600 Wii points? No, not really. The gameplay gets a bit repetitive after a while, and the puzzles boil down to trying not to push rocks into the wrong place. Maybe if you find 4 people with enough patience to get past the second dungeon you might have some fun, but that's going to be a challenge.